demanded Victor's presence outside her front door 30 minutes from that very second, without asking what his current location was or whether that was even possible. She ignored his protestations, cut him off mid-sentence and replaced the receiver. Next came the shoes and the coat, and she returned to her chair, knees together, with a blanket bundled around her hands and resting on her lap. Every now and then, Troy gave a confident nod to say, "I'm right about this one, you'll see." Victor was late, but she wasn't expecting him to be arriving on time. Troy had been an hour and 17 minutes late on his first day. He'd stumbled onto her threshold, all limbs, hair and PVC. One gin later and that was that. He hadn't been hard to ensnare. Now glanced at the flyer on the coffee table. Rough paper, a photocopy of a photocopy and 3 rows of text sharpied out. Precisely 57 minutes later, shadow engulfed the room and Troy and Nell clustered at the window. The upper part of an enormous black lorry had eclipsed the sun from their yard, and a crude white movie reel was painted on the side, peeking over Nell's hedge. "Not what you're expecting?" Nell asked. "I might have made a mistake." "We can't both have made a mistake, Troy. Go on, make yourself scarce." He bounded up the stairs in 4 giant strides, and Nell hovered in the hallway behind the frosted glass. Victor's blurred image grew larger in the window. Before he could ring the bell, she stuck her fingers through the letterbox and exaggerated her voice again. "What do you want?" "You told me to come. You insisted, actually." "You are, however, late," Nell whispered, forcing Victor's ear closer to the letterbox. "If you hadn't hung up on me, I might have been able to tell you I'd be late." He was prickly. "Good." "What are the clouds like today?" she asked. "The clouds?" "Yes, describe them to me." "I don't know. Grey? Wispy?" "Come now, Mr. Pictures, you can do better than that. That's not my name." "Step back a little, you'll see them better." Victor's blurred image shuffled in the window. He looked animated, like he hadn't quite shaken his boyhood energies. "They're just clouds. I don't know what you want from me." His face was faint, his voice was faint. He yelled from the pathway as he made his way back to the door. "How do they make you feel? Forlorn or feisty?" Nell shouted. "Forlorn or feisty? Is that my choice?" "By all means choose another. They were only suggestions. If you must know, they're making me dizzy as I've had to crane my neck and practically blind myself from staring at them for too long." "Good enough," Nell said, happy he had made a smile for the first time. "What is?" "I have an errand at St. James's and you are going to take me there." "And what?" He stooped and lifted the letterbox. "Look, can we open the door? It'll be easier to explain, but I can't. Indeed we can." Nell had no intention of hearing explanations. She unravelled her blanket and threw it over her head. Troy would be watching and could describe it to her later. But for now, all she could see was muted light struggling through the fibres draped over her face. Nell felt her way across the threshold and wriggled one hand out from under the fabric in the direction of her new guest. "Shall we?" she said, and enjoyed the silence. There was a noticeable pause before Victor took Nell's hand and hooked it into the crook of his elbow without a mention of the blanket. It reminded Nell of Eric. Troy had gone the other way and almost turned the blanket into a character of its own, potentially annoying, but Troy had a way of pulling things off. There was more maturity than she'd imagined to Victor, and she slowed her pace, making the short walk last. Safety was not something she valued very much, but it was interesting to feel it so vividly in those few moments. It wasn't until they were at the truck that Victor spoke again. He would have to lift her, he said. He was sorry, but had not anticipated she might need a ramp. He lifted her onto the truck like a father might place a daughter on a garden wall. This left her legs dangling while he stepped behind her, placed his arms around her waist and raised her to standing. She went from feeling like a child to feeling like an object, and not a very precious one at that. He was untrained, she was old, and the blanket was an encumbrance, but they got there in the end. She found herself backed into a square seat like you might find at the theatre, and she felt 2 velvet seats either side of her. She spat out a few threads of blanket that had gathered in her mouth from the tussle. "It's okay now," Victor said when he closed the door, and Nell removed the blanket. They weighed each other up for the first time. He was slender, more wimpish than she might have imagined. He was sallow-cheeked, wide-eyed, and had a mop of dull brown hair that went almost vertical. Weathered and settled in his features, but not yet properly lined, late 30s. She gave him a moment to take her in. "You expected some deformity, no doubt." "No, not at all." He looked like he wanted to ask something, but stopped himself and replaced it with, "What is this errand, and where in St. James's exactly?" "I'll direct when we get there." "Head for Piccadilly." "How will you direct me? There are no windows, and you won't know where we are." You will be my eyes, Victor. You did such a terrific job on those clouds after all. We can't go wrong. She caught it, just for a second. A look or a smile that showed he'd seen whatever it was that had ensnared the others. This was going to work out, if she wanted it to. What is this place? She asked. It's a cinema. I got those seats from the Phoenix when they refurbished, all the picture houses. Comfortable? Do you know how difficult it is to feel comfortable in your 80s? Obviously not. Well, your little moving pictures is certainly intriguing, and that will do for now. When are you going to play me? Sorry? You said this is a cinema. I presume I get to watch something on that postage stamp you call a screen. He flitted about the shelves, like a scholar desperately trying to remember which volume contained the crucial formula. He lauded, then dismissed countless classics, driven to find exactly the right film for her, and she was resolved to accept any choice he made, though she was curious as to what that might be. Younger people sanitise things for the elderly. Society could carry on that way if it wanted, but Nell had already opted out and built her own empire. It was just a question of whether Victor had noticed.